Time for the waiver wire presented by YouTube TV. Some names that you might be interested in at the quarterback spot. Jameis Winston taking over for Derek Carr. Russell Wilson, who hasn't been all that bad. Andy Dalton, keep an eye obviously on Bryce Young's status. And CJ Stroud doing big things for the Texans. At running back, of course, Devontae Chain is the guy that everybody's going to want this week. Jalen Warren, who's taking over in Pittsburgh little by little. Kendra Miller, who we still believe in. Elijah Mitchell. And Rico Dowdle. Taking a look at some pass catchers. Wide receivers. Tank Dell still getting plenty of opportunity in Houston. Elijah Moore. Keep an eye on him in Cleveland. Adam Thielen had a big game this past week for the Panthers. Romeo Doubs very quietly putting up some production for Green Bay. Marvin Mims not getting a lot of snaps, but doing a lot with his opportunities. You got Josh Downs in Indy, sort of the same thing. And Wan'Dale Robinson, not many snaps, but they seem to target him every time he's on the field. At tight end, we keep imploring you to pick up Sam Laporta. We're going to keep doing this until you guys listen to us. Jake Ferguson and Luke Musgrave, who's having a really nice start to his season in Green Bay. Now the man who puts together the list, it's our friend Matt Okada. You can check out his column every single week at NFL.com/waiverwire.
Yeah, Okada.
What's up?
Okada, this is a big week of waivers, huh?
I mean, it's one name is as big as it can possibly get. Otherwise, yeah, it's still a solid week. All these early season weeks are going to be big.
So that big name that you said is as big as it gets. It's a specific running back that likes to play in Southern Florida, isn't it?
Yeah, I did some brief research. I do not think it's ever been the case that a running back on the waiver wire has scored 50-plus fantasy points, but that's what Devontae Chain did last week in an absolute smattering of the Broncos. Probably, let's be honest, going to be the highest fantasy output of A-Chain's career. But honestly, the most encouraging thing wasn't the 51 fantasy points or the 4 touchdowns or the 200 rushing yards. It was that A-Chain looked as fast and explosive as he's been advertised to be. We all know how much Mike McDaniel, branch off the Kyle Shanahan tree that he is, values speed and explosivity. We absolutely saw that on Sunday. Here's the next-gen nugget for you. 3 fastest top speeds by a rusher so far this season, in order, are A-Chain, Raheem Mostert, and A-Chain again. So my man is fast. I think this might end up being a little bit of a frustrating thing where sometimes Mostert has a good week, sometimes A-Chain has a good week, but I'm probably going to be starting either one because in this offense, both of them are going to be scoring fantasy points.
It is a legit track team that Mike McDaniel has put together down there in Miami. The Houston Texans have been way more pass-heavy than we thought. I mean, look, we knew Nico Collins was going to get targets, but Tank Dell is become a name that everybody needs to know now, right, Matt?
I think so. Here's the thing. Okay, we're going to follow the math here. He's basically exactly doubled his receiving output each week so far. 34 yards in week 1, 72 in week 2, 145 last week. So at this rate, we can expect like 1,000 yards in week 6 against the Saints. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. No, but seriously, though, this is a swift and exciting breakout for Tank. And for anyone who doesn't know him yet, 23-year-old rookie out of Houston, had a couple huge years in college before entering the draft. Went 69th overall to the Texans. Big concern is his size. He's 5'8", 165 pounds. So basically, he makes Devontae Smith look like DK Metcalf. But he's a separation savant. He's very fast. He's got insane quick twitch ability. So he's the kind of guy who might be able to survive in the NFL at his size, kind of a la Tyler Lockett, by just never getting hit. And I do think Sunday's performance loosely cements his place as the Texans wide receiver 2. Behind Nico Collins. And you mentioned the opportunity that we're seeing there in the passing game. I think he's a legit threat for wide receiver 2 upside in fantasy rest of season.
And opportunity is what we're always chasing in fantasy. So I know Elijah Moore didn't have the biggest fantasy output in week 3, but the opportunities were there.
Yeah, I've kind of created a challenge for myself in the waiver wire column to see how many times I can recommend Elijah Moore, watch him earn valuable usage, underperform in the fantasy box score, go nowhere in rostership percentage, and then recommend him again the next week. But to your point, 7 targets in week 1, 9 targets in week 2, 9 targets and 9 catches in week 3, and still has yet to crack 15 fantasy points. I hope you guys are sitting down, which you are. He is averaging 1.1 fantasy points per target in PPR, where you get a point just for catching the ball at the line of scrimmage. That is unsustainable inefficiency, in my opinion, especially with Moore's talent. So with Deshaun Watson and the offense maybe slowly starting to figure themselves out, perhaps it looks like, I think maybe Moore's Cleveland breakout might be soon to follow. And keep in mind, they went out and traded for him, and they've shown the concerted effort to use him, to get him involved early. We just need to see that effort translate into the box score and into fantasy, and then he'll be a big breakout candidate.
Nothing helps you get right more than the Tennessee Titans secondary. Apparently, it made Deshaun Watson look like he was kind of getting back together again. Adam Thielen, it seems like we're always ready to write him off, and just when we do, he comes back around again. Do you think this has some staying power in Carolina?
Possibly. And it really depends on the bar that you set for what staying power looks like for Adam Thielen. 11 catches, 14 targets, 145 yards, and a touchdown in week 3. Now, perhaps that was largely due to Andy Dalton instead of Bryce Young standing in for the rookie. But that was after Bryce Young did find Thielen for 7 catches and a touchdown in week 2 against a strong Saints defense. And it looked like maybe Bryce was starting to learn, and Dalton now put on full display what has remained true about Adam Thielen for like a decade. He is a solid, reliable safety blanket who's especially valuable on third downs and in the red zone, as we've seen touchdown 2 straight weeks. Yes, he is 33 years old, and no, he's probably not going to return to double-digit touchdown Thielen from back in like 2020 or before. But there's very little else to throw to for the Panthers, and they are going to be throwing all game, all year with this defense and team. And Thielen seems to be the clear favorite to lead them in every fantasy-relevant receiving category. So it's not super pretty, it's not super exciting, but in PPR, Thielen might be an every week play if somewhat low ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's easy to overlook something when the other team drops 70 on you. But for a second straight week, Russell Wilson went out and threw for over 300 yards. Is he someone that we should be targeting on the waiver wire?
He did exactly that. And I think yes, especially for this next week. We'll get to that in a second. But briefly, just looking back a little bit, since a late season fantasy resurgence back in week 14 of last year, Russell Wilson has averaged over 19 fantasy points per game. That is good for 5th among quarterbacks over that span. The only guys ahead of him are Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, and good old Kirko. Who knew? And no, he wasn't superb for fantasy in the shellacking the Dolphins game on Sunday, but like you said, 300 yards for a second consecutive week. He seems to have an increasingly healthy Jerry Jeudy, an effective Cortland Sutton, the king of fantasy points per route run in Marvin Mims, like Marcus mentioned. Please, Sean Payton, use him more. I don't know how you're not. Plus, Russell Wilson had 56 rushing yards in week 2, so that's still apparently a tool he can pull out of his belt. And back to the week 4 situation, he's facing the Bears defense. They are not good, and they've allowed 7 passing touchdowns in 3 games. So I think Russ is a great week 4 stream, but I also think he's like one of the best streaming combo type quarterbacks where you have him and another guy in the top 15 or 20, and you pick the best matchup each week and end up with a decent fantasy output.
I mean, we got Bears and Broncos in week 4, 2 teams that just got drilled in week 3. Something's got to give. It's basically stoppable force against movable object in that one. So we'll see how that one goes. In the meantime, of course, if you want to get ahead of everybody else on the waiver wire and start to look forward, Okada's got some guys to stash. That's S-T-A-C-H-E. Who are 2 guys that people need to maybe get ahead of the curve on?
Sure. So Rico Dowdle, number 1. And let's be honest, any handcuffs to any of the elite usage RBs are always worth a stash. We can look at Jerome Ford for evidence of that. So you've also got guys like Elijah Mitchell for the Niners and Tyjae Spears for the Titans. But as for Dowdle, on the Cowboys, looked very impressive in limited action behind Pollard in Sunday's inexplicable loss to the Cardinals, 46 yards on 7 touches. I'm not ever putting him in my lineup as long as Pollard is there. But if an injury, please, fantasy gods, don't let it happen, ever occurs for Pollard, Dowdle could have RB2, maybe even RB1 upside in an offense like this, given the lead role if he were to get it. And then this is my sneaky favorite stash, Wan'Dale Robinson, Giants wide receiver. 6 fantasy points on TNF in his return from a torn ACL. Not superb, but 5 targets on only 10 snaps, which you mentioned hitting that full screen. Superb. That's like Puka Nacua levels of superb, which is a measuring stick we're using now. And for anyone who's forgotten, which is probably everyone outside of Giants fans, Robinson had 13 targets, 9 catches, and 100 yards in his last game of 2022. He was a 43rd overall pick in that draft by the Giants. They desperately need a go-to guy to step up in this offense, and I think Robinson has as good a chance as anyone. And if I can give you a little chunk of research here, pulling back to the old research days, I was looking at Puka Nacua this last week, trying to find out if there were some signs in his prospect profile of the breakout he's currently having. During that process, I narrowed down a list of college wideouts who'd hit a spread of elite benchmarks in usage, receiving grade, yards per route run, and draft capital, which are some of the stickier analytics factors in scouting. This was the list over the last 5 seasons. Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Drake London, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Elijah Moore, and Wan'Dale Robinson. That's nice company. So I think he might actually be really good. And if Daniel Jones and the Giants figure that out, he could be one of the sneakier breakouts of the 2023 season. If you've got a bench spot, just put him in there. See what happens over the next few weeks.
I mean, from your lips to the fantasy guys' ears, I've got Wan'Dale Robinson stashed at the end of a dynasty bench. Would love to get him in if we ever get an opportunity. Him and Jalen Hyatt. At some point, you got to think the Giants are going to figure some things out. But, you know, who knows? I just talk about fake football for a living. Matt Okada does great work. Go check him out first on Twitter at Matt Okada. And you can check out his column every single week at NFL.com/waiverwire. Matt, appreciate the information. We will talk to you again next week. In the meantime, let's tee up some of your fantasy questions that you sent us at NFL Fantasy on socialmediawebsite.com. The first one coming from Mike. Do I give up and try to trade Calvin Ridley? Wow. People pulling the shoot on Ridley after 3 weeks?
Yeah, that's why I'm able to write about him as I start and start sit this week. Maybe it's just vibes based, but the volume going his way is too good. He almost, in each of the last 2 games, had a near touchdown. If he catches those, we're viewing him very different.
I'm not giving up on Ridley yet, man. Don't do it. This one from Jimmy. Is JSN a fraud this year or no? Got told he was a hybrid of JJ and Chase. Guess that's Justin Jefferson. Got told he used to have his feet kissed in college by Wilson and Olave. Now man's a wide receiver 5 getting out-targeted by Bobo. What's happening? Pump the brakes.
This is the greatest tweet we've ever gotten. It's been rough. I'm not, look, you're not starting JSN anywhere right now, but you're not giving up and dropping him yet either. The upside, I still believe, is far too high.
Absolutely. This next one from Damo. Is Derrick Henry washed? I'm going to say no.
No, but the offense is dragging him down. Right now. That's what the offense is dragging D-Hop down too.
Yeah, the Titans offense is a mess right now. Last one. Should I drop or trade Najee Harris? He feels like dead weight. We sort of talked about that. You can't really drop him, but you're not going to like what you get back in a trade for him either.
You could try to trade for him right now. I'm not. Maybe you have a Steelers fan in your league who still believes or something.
Yeah, he's sort of an anchor. He really is sort of dead weight on your roster, and it's a hard thing to try to figure out. All right. Well, we appreciate you hanging out with us. That is it. We are done. We love you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by Subway. You know the drill. Tell 2 friends to tell 2 friends. Rate, review, and remember, a synonym is a word you use when you can't spell the other one. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. And we'll talk to you again real soon.